Do you have questions for me? Questions about exercise in menopause and what you should be doing. So you're not alone if you do. I'm Deborah Atkinson and you're listening, and this is a very unusual podcast. You may be watching on YouTube a very special episode of Flipping 50. This is where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share how to eat and how to move and how to change your mindset so that you can have the exercise that supports the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. So today what I'm doing is actually answering several frequently asked questions of late. And part of this comes out of some posts that I've made on Instagram and on Facebook and comments from those. And many times we have a group. If you're not in it, you're welcome to join it. It's open to the public, although it's a private group. So you can put things in there. If you're a podcast listener, you're a YouTube channel subscriber, or you're a Flipping 50 TV fan, and that's how we found each other. You can join the Insiders group. It's at facebook.com/groups. Just look for Flipping 50 Insiders. And it's a great place to put your questions. If you're not already in one of my programs where you can ask a question about something going on for you, that's a great place to put it. So some of you are reaching out to support@flipping50.com. My tech team has not got a clue about how to coach you. And I don't really get behind the scenes in there unless somebody is sick or injured. And they don't want me back there dealing with technology. So coaching happens through our private Facebook groups and our one-on-one master classes that we do for either classes and or for our membership cafe. But otherwise, that Insiders group is the place for you to go. So what I'm doing today is taking the time to pluck some of the questions that have gotten from that Insiders group and or from YouTube and comments back on my post in the last week or so. So I've got a few notes down here with the questions on them, actually, not with the answers. So you'll see me, if you're watching the video, kind of when I'm thinking, my eyes go up. So pardon me for not making eye contact, but that's really how it happens. So literally I want to start like this. There is some confusion and some questions about hearing controversial or a difference of opinion from me and from different experts about exercise during menopause. So the question was, I need some clarity. Do I need to do different exercise as I age? And much of this came because I was interviewed this past week by a journalist who I won't throw under the bus, who was just doing her job. Actually, she was following through on a story, on a lead, and I had responded that I could answer that question. And so she grabbed me and said, okay, let's do a phone call. So as we got on the telephone, she gave me a very leading question, and she started with, so what signs would somebody have in their 40s or after that they need to slow down? And this is targeting men and women, just aging in general. And I said, wait a minute. I said, are you trying to write an article that really addresses the science and what we know to be true as we age and exercise? Or are you trying to write a persuasive article about slowing down and doing less as you age? Tell me which, because I might not be your girl if you want to do the latter. And she said, no, I want, if you don't agree with that, I want to know that, and I want to know what the science is. So we'll see what happens, because sometimes when you talk to the media, it doesn't always get published the way you had intended, the quote. So, but you have to swing the bat. If you want your voice to be heard, you have to try, because that's the way we get the good things out. And if it comes out incorrectly, then I've got to pick that up and run with it and share it with people on social media and say, this is where I was misquoted. Let me clarify. This is why it was misquoted, because this is dogma. And she would have assumed that I was probably going with the same dogma that others have done for decades. So that's how I'll handle it. That's how you have to handle it. But let me answer the question that then came up. So as I posted about, this is a leading question and here's the truth. We are faced, you are faced, and me in any other thing. We trust when we see things in the news, whether we see it on television or we see it online, or we're reading it in print or online, we take it for granted, sometimes too much, that this is now factual, because it's like, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus because you saw it in the paper, right? So it must be true. And, what we are forgetting often is that what we're paying attention to, we're reading or we're watching or we're hearing, is the expert that's talking or writing or doing it, their opinion of the situation. It's their one step removed from the actual facts. We're not sure exactly what they are unless they are specifically quoting facts. And even then, you and I know from writing a paper in junior high or high school or college, depending on when it was, that we could probably go find scientific evidence for almost any argument that we want to make. So there's science on this side, there's science on that side. There's pros and cons. That's the nature of a debate. And so what we're doing here is definitely having a conversation. And what I'm trying to present you with is facts so that you can make an informed decision. And if I'm responsible, a journalist is responsible, they have to present them on both sides, right? On the pros and on the cons, so that you just make the informed decision. It's not a persuasive kind of an argument. So do you need to do different exercise in menopause? That was kind of the question that came out of some things. And here's my answer to that. So you have the same body that you had 10 and 20 and 30 years ago. Now, I know some of us are going to argue, but the same body parts, all right? So we have the same muscle, we have bones, we have ligaments, and yet I know they may not look the same size, they may not be the same strength or the same stamina, but you can't do any other exercises than you could then, meaning your joints only have so much action. And maybe you've got to have an injury since 20 or 30 years ago and you can't do every movement you could then. So yes, squats and lunges and chest press and bent over rows, the same kind of movements forward and back and laterally and sideways, rotation, or any combination of those types of moves, that's what we've got to work with. So there aren't any suddenly there's a change of what you should be doing, but we're talking those major muscle group kinds of exercises, resistance training exercise, whether it's your body weight or you've got additional weight that you're lifting, or you've got a weighted vest on or dumbbells in your hands. But there are lots of different kinds of exercises. So there's yoga, there's Pilates, there's now bar exercise, there's boxing, there's swimming, there's running, there's jumping, there's walking, there's you name it, all the different kinds of activities. Do you need different exercise? Not necessarily. We can use all of those things. They have a place, but what we need to do often is pay more attention to what's true now, today, of the muscle you have and the muscle you need, the bones you have and the bones you need, the joints and ligaments that you have in their status, and what we need to do to work with that now and how we might be able to improve it or change it. So you may have had an injury. You may have a torn meniscus in your knee, and that's going to dictate that you can't do the same exercises. We need to find some substitutes. So other than that, however, you do have the same exercise pool available to pick from, but most likely you need a different protocol. at midlife, women in menopause, starting early in their 40s, sometimes sooner than that, we have hormones that are very different, a very different profile than when we were pre-menopausal, not perimenopausal, but pre that, when we were just healthy adults, and if we wanted to produce children, we could. We're no longer as fertile. When we start changing that way in perimenopause, everything starts to change. When hormones begin to change, your muscle, your bone, your joint health, your gut health, your energy level, all of it changes. That should definitely change your exercise. You still may need to do squats and lunges and bent over rows, and yes, but you need to change your exercise in terms of the protocol. And protocol refers to, first of all, I mean, if we really look at science, making sure that you and I are the subjects in the study. Because if a study was done on 25-year-old elite athletes of any sport who are at the peak of their muscle mass and training season, and we're just starting exercise, or maybe we're not, we're even enthusiasts and we've been doing it for a long time, we don't have the same hormone profile, the same metabolism, the same body composition, or even the same socialization. We don't think about exercise the same as they do. Nothing about our exercise will be very similar at all. So drawing the conclusion that if it works for them, this is what we should do, is totally wrong. So it may backfire for you because of your unique profile. So what I say when we mean protocols, that really refers to which exercises are you going to do, sure, but more so what sequence, like what order are they going to be in? How many sets are you going to do? How many repetitions? What combination of exercises are you going to do? Because sometimes we pair all upper body exercise together. Sometimes we go upper and lower body together, and it changes the way that it will affect your body. So there's got to be some reason that we're choosing the protocol that we are. And ideally, it's been proven in subjects just like you to work. To generally, we want to increase our lean muscle tissue, we want to decrease body fat, and we'll do that potentially by increasing lean muscle tissue, but sometimes we can also burn more fat by doing the exercise. So increasing mobility is also typically a goal, or at the very least maintaining it, and maintaining lean muscle, those are goals. So you have to look at what exercise you should do based on, and every individual of every age should be doing this. The thing is, during midlife, we used to be like on this, what I call the 8-lane highway, and we could like shift lanes whenever we wanted to and get right back to going as fast as we wanted to. We're now on this narrow 1-lane highway for a short term. While you're going through those latter stages of perimenopause and those early stages of postmenopause, it's like we have to get it right. We have to, as they say, drive it between the navigational buoys and keep it running right down the middle. We just don't have the latitude, because if we throw things off, we are going to increase our cravings, make ourselves exhausted, not sleep, and in all of those just further throw us out of balance. So we're really trying to respond responsibly to the signs and symptoms that perimenopause sends out about what's happening with your hormones. So we don't just blindly do any exercise prescription. If there are 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds in your exercise class or program, and men and women, it is not for any one of us. So it hasn't been really well planned based on research on anybody, let alone you, because we just need a little bit more kid gloves, for a little while. Coming back out of it and learning to train appropriately, it doesn't mean you can't do any of the things you don't love to do, or you can't do any of the things that you love to do. You can, but you're going to have to be a little bit more cautious, especially those of you, and I know you, who like to do endurance exercise as I do. Doing too much exercise, too much endurance exercise often just throws you under the bus during menopause, especially perimenopause. And until you're really through postmenopause, you've got to watch out what's happening, because that can really spike your cortisol, and you're much more sensitive to cortisol when your estrogen drops. Cortisol rises, and cortisol is trying to take over for estrogen. It does a really poor job. It's not efficient. It does maybe 10% of the work that estrogen did, but it tries. And while it's present in this greater abundance, it's also helping you store more fat. So if you're already in a peak of cortisol, exercise is stress. It's perceived as stress by your body. So what's going to happen if you over exercise is you may find you're puffier and fluffier, and you're retaining fluid and you're fatter. You're not actually losing more weight, which you've always heard that exercise more, eat less, or you've heard you got to burn more calories and that'll do it. That is still living up here, even if logically you say, okay, I get it, that makes sense. You'll still default potentially to exercising more. So you've got to just put these little post-it notes everywhere that say, no, do yoga. If you have to move, do yoga. You've got to have those reminders. Okay, so we've got things we have to factor in. So the signs and symptoms that your hormones sending you. If you have hot flashes, you have night sweats, you have gained weight for really no apparent reason. You're eating the same as you used to, you were exercising the same as you used to, and yeah, you're still gaining weight. It's not working. That's a sign. You're putting on belly fat. You may not even be gaining weight, but you're putting on belly fat. That's another sign. That's cortisol. Relocating fat cells to your belly. Thank you very much. No, thank you. Right? But it does happen. So we want to take those signs and symptoms, working with somebody who knows what they're doing with exercise and hormones, not who will just say, here's what your hormones are doing, so here's the kind of exercise you should be doing, because there's so much more to it. The time of day that you should be doing it, the response to doing it afterward, then what do you do the next day and the next day? Those things also matter. What do you eat before you exercise, or do you eat before you exercise? For women in midlife, all of those answers to all those questions are super important. So once we've taken in that kind of, let's unpack what's happening with your hormones right now that maybe wasn't true 5 years ago for you. And then we talk about conditions that you might have, or old injuries. What's going on with your joints and your ligaments, any bones, any muscle tissue damage, or conditions that you might have that would affect those things. Like by conditions, one of the obvious is osteoporosis, but that's not seen. You'd have to tell me that you had it, or I wouldn't know it. Fibromyalgia is another one. I can't see it, but often people will tell me they've got it, and then we need to be a little bit more cautious with your exercise prescription. So we do enough, but not too much. Okay, but then also, it's not just conditions or your prior injuries and what's going on with joints right now that are sensitive, but it could be like your big toe, like arthritis in your big toe, or a bunion. Plantar fasciitis sets you up so that you can't come back into a lunge position, for instance. But then it's also your time. How much time do you realistically have, and what's your mojo, right? I mean, what's your pleasure? So here's where there are things that I want you to create. A lot of people say, well, how do I pick? What I really like to do is this, this, and this. And I put that over here because we've got to factor that in, what you like. Loving it is a big part of sticking with it. But then we have to say, okay, create a shopping list, just like you were going to the grocery store. So you want to get all the things on the list. You don't want to get home and say, I've done that. In fact, I'm going to the store today because I've done that. And I forgot the distilled water. But anyway, so is it that you've lost lean muscle, you can't see any tone, or is it that you've gained fat, or are you retaining water? Have you lost mobility? You feel stiff all the time. Figure out what's your shopping list. Like, if this would change in 3 months, I would be so happy. Write that down. And then what we need to do really is match your exercise selection to those things, because the last thing, hormones for a woman in midlife, conditions that you might have at this point, or what's going on for your joints, old injuries or special conditions you've got, the time available, but your enjoyment of it is going to lend itself to doing it. So it's your preference. What will give you motivation? We've got to like it. So we want you to, yes, let's figure out what we do, and you will like it better when you start getting results. So one of the questions I'm asked so very often is, how do you stay motivated? Or how do we get motivated? I'm having a mojo problem. And part of that is you've got to see the end in sight. I mean, if you see that starting something has a direct, immediate gratification, we're all in a little bit more, right? So if you go play the slots in Vegas, if you've ever done that and you've ever pulled that thing down and you've won, I mean, now you're hooked and you'll do it again. If you've ever gone golfing and not even, had a hole in one or chipped one in, but you just felt that hit the sweet spot, it made that certain special noise, and it just was a beautiful shot, you're hooked. You'll play another 18 holes badly, right? Because that happened. And that's really, we want to get you those moments where, okay, I can feel it, and maybe not while I'm doing it, but after I'm done, I felt better all day. I had more energy, more clarity. I slept better. Something right away happens for you. Those things are important. So we've got to factor all of it in. And back to exercises, just to make one more illustration about the importance of the kind of exercise you're doing. So when I described, we've got the same body parts as anybody else, right? So we can only do so many movements. So chest press and rows and squats and lunges, I might have just said, okay, there you go, that's your program. And you might run away with that. But the problem is it's also that sequence and how many sets, how many repetitions, how much time between those sets and repetitions, or the rest in the set, and what combination do we do those exercises. All that matters. But the other thing that matters is technique. It's not just a doing it or what you do. So it's not just writing a list out on a chalkboard or dry erase board or a post in a Facebook page that's the workout of the day, but it's how you do it that really makes it truly hormone balancing and appropriate for your muscles and for your joints. You have to do it correctly to get the right results. So what I feel like my magic is the ability to answer your questions before you know to ask them, especially when it comes to exercise. So there's so many nuances that often there are a lot of really good instructors and trainers out there, but not all of them have the intuitiveness to know what to tell you about where you want that weight bearing to be and where you don't want it to be, about where you should feel it and where you shouldn't feel it, based on where commonly people feel it when they're doing it incorrectly. And the only way you can know that is, in part, years of experience. Somewhat it helps to be in the boat rowing with you. So, my knees are not the knees I had when I was 25 either. In some ways they're better, in some ways they're worse, right? But it's important that you realize that those cues make the exercise comfortable for you and effective for you, or they don't. And I want to point out that there is a big difference between the broad range of the application of the term fitness professional, or I've been a fitness instructor for 20 years. The difference is, and I'm just giving you an example. So this in January will be year 37, the beginning of year 37 for me. So I hope you just gasp, right? Because I was 5 when I started. Just kidding. So when somebody says, I've been doing this for 20 years, you've got to really dig a little bit deeper, because isn't there a big difference when you say on the expertise of, a doctor on his first day, or a doctor on his, 21st year of running a clinic day in, day out, delivering babies or whatever, right? that probably matters. There's a level of confidence that you have in that physician who's got a track record. And the same is true of fitness professionals. Fitness professionals who have been fitness instructors or personal trainers can say they've got years of experience, but what you want to know is that 3 hours a week of teaching exercise classes, or is that 40 or more hours a week teaching and training a very specific demographic, like women in midlife or athletes, if that's who you are and who you're looking for. You want to know that you've got an expert, right? Not a general jack of all trades, somebody who, doesn't just have, I've loved this and I've been doing this for 20 years and I decided to be a trainer because. So there is a very unique difference in experience level between someone who's got a certification, even got a degree, but done it part-time, and somebody who's done this all day, every day for 40 years, right? So I want to point that out to you, that you want to really do your homework about who's talking and does this matter to me? And we're all going to make our own decisions, and it may be very unique, maybe different than mine. And it may be that simply because you know someone, like somebody, trust somebody, that you'll gamble on them and roll the dice. But I think it's fair that in the fitness industry, that's where many of our trainers come from, is a part-time instructor who was teaching, 2 or 4 exercise classes a week and then decided, I really like this and I'm going to be a trainer. And they've got years experience as a trainer, but maybe that's 10 or fewer hours a week. Does that qualify for years of experience or not? So I think it is lots of different experts, but Malcolm Gladwell is the author of several books. And in one of them, he says 10,000 hours, right, is what we've always told students that, if you want to get good at, say, doing body composition, when we used to do it the old-fashioned way with skin fold calipers, we used to tell them they needed to do 5,000 repetitions to even be good, at doing it. So that means, you're in a university exercise clinic pinching fat all day, many times during the semester. So I can tell you that I've done that. But, not a lot of people have 10,000 hours who may be, training you or giving you advice. So it's important to know that, and where is experts, where does that come in, and experience is a part of that. Okay, so there you have it. Those were the biggest questions that came in this week. And every once in a while, I sweep through that Facebook group, the Flipping 50 Insiders, or I gather comments from a new video on YouTube, and I hold on to those questions. Literally, I have little screenshots of questions sitting on my screen. So if you could see my screen right now, you would scream. But that's how I decide to do new episodes, because there's a theme and more than one person is asking about it. So if you've got a question, best place to put it is below this YouTube video, below the show comments and we'll call this show notes at flipping50.com/Q&A. So Q&A, it'll be under the podcast as I get it posted. And just a heads up, so thanks for sticking with me. And if you were looking for some of the things really I just described, if that made sense to you, if it resonates with you, the Flipping 50 Cafe is open for enrollment right now as I'm releasing this podcast and video. And it will be open for the early bird during Black Friday week. So some of the best specials of the season, and it will be open one more time at the very end of the year. And we open it generally twice a year. We just did a little early Black Friday goodies, and then we will see you in January. So if you want to get started, if that resonates and you're exercising but not getting the results, you're not actually taking protocols that were made for you based on research for you and applying the sequence, the exercise, the combinations, taking the right sets and reps and the rest between them to get the best results. It's time, isn't it? What are you waiting for? Let's you and I start flipping 50 today.